on YouTube with UFC 334 obviously being announced that it's going to be in Madison Square Garden, UFC going back to the Garden on November 14th. There has been some predictions on Twitter or some leaks on Twitter of what the bout order is going to look like. And if this plays through, this is going to be the best card of the century. Take a look at this, what I found on Twitter. This is actually insane. From the start to the very end. Lucas Fernando just found a card. He was absolutely phenomenal. So it'd be interesting to see how he does against another guy that's kind of new and is doing well in the UFC. And then obviously the next fight, we got Alberto Montes, who is a dog, who just had a bad performance, right? He didn't get finished, but he was getting beat up against Aston Bashi, who had another bad performance, but had some moments. And he was doing well. Then obviously you got Justin Jacoby, who's always going to have a banging fight versus Toshalov, who is also a similar style, just going to have a banger fight. Then we got Marcus McGee, who is coming off of a loss from Peter Yan, but he's going against a up-and-comer with Garrett Armfield. Then going into Steve Erceg versus Yulabekov. Who I haven't heard too much about him. He's ranked, which I'm surprised. I haven't heard too much about him or haven't watched too many of his fights that I can remember. But obviously Steve Erceg is a dog. He got finished his last fight, but he was having some early success against I forget what his name was, but he's from Uzbekistan, and he's really good. The guy that Steve Erceg lost to, but obviously, like I said, Steve Erceg just fought for the belt not that long ago, so that was a banger fight. Next fight, Basharat versus Cody Durden. That would be another banger. Just two guys that just go in there and just give it their all, and just kind of throw hands. And those are all of these fights are really entertaining fights and could easily happen, right? Turbula versus Taliesin Teixeira. Taliesin Teixeira obviously trains with Alex Pereira, and Turbula just came off of a hard loss to Rekic in the UFC Serbia, but he had a good fight, just obviously couldn't get the job done, and so it didn't take that much damage though, so him making a quick turn isn't that big of a deal. Then obviously we got the highly anticipated Kevin Vallejos versus Steve Garcia. That will be a banger of a fight. Obviously Steve Garcia just lost to at UFC Freedom 250 against Diego Lopez, and then Kevin Vallejos just had a crazy knockout against I can't remember who it is. Sorry for the hiccups. I can't remember who it is, but then that would be a banger of a fight. Then going into the next fight, Sergey Popovich versus the former light heavyweight champion Jamal Hill, making his debut in heavyweight. Obviously, he's talked about it for a long time. Obviously, he's been in some crazy like Twitter pictures, like just showing how out of shape he is to make that jump to heavyweight. But this fight isn't until November, so it gives him plenty of time to get into good shape for a heavyweight bout. And Sergey Popovich isn't an easy fight for Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill he did get knocked out. He got TKO'd by Pereira, but hasn't been like clean knocked out. He's been knocked down a couple times, but so that would be an interesting fight for Jamal Hill to see how he performs against a heavy hitter, a true heavyweight in Pavlovich. That would be a banger fight. But then these next three fights are absolutely insane. We got Usman Nurmagomedov coming from PFL, making his debut against Max Holloway. That would be insane fight. Obviously, a lot of hype with Usman Nurmagomedov, a cousin of Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then making his debut against Max Holloway, who has all the hype right now. Obviously, he still has that hype from when he beat Justin Gaethje. People are talking about him fighting for the belt next, which I think makes sense, but obviously you have Armin there. So I think this would be a good tune-up fight, and obviously Max just was on Twitter saying like he doesn't care who it is, just give him a fight as soon as possible. So yeah, I think this would make a whole lot of sense. Usman, obviously first fight in the UFC, to have Max Holloway as a name, I think you have to do it for Usman just because of how big of a name he is at PFL, and for him to make that transition to UFC, right, you have to give him a big name, at least top 10, at least top 5. Sorry. So yeah, I think that makes sense a lot of sense in my eyes, and to have him in the bout order, yeah, that makes sense. This next one, I don't think it's going to be for the BMF belt, because they did talk about completely getting rid of the BMF belt, but there has been talks about this fight just in general, so I think this makes sense to be at UFC 334, and that is Charles Oliveira versus Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez making his move. He said on Twitter or on Instagram or in an interview that he is for sure moving up to lightweight. So there has been talks about this fight for the longest. Since he said that, there has been talks about this fight, and again, I think that just makes sense. Even just interchanging them, maybe Usman gets Diego Lopez and Max versus Charles Oliveira rematch, or Usman versus Oliveira and Diego Lopez versus Max Holloway. There's all of these talks have been happening. So either way, I see this, like, these are all just banger fights. And then obviously for the main event, we got Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane rematch. And so yeah, let me know what you guys think about this fight card. Obviously this is just a rumor, but I think if this stays together, this is honestly probably the best. Going to be like another last UFC that we had in Sacramento, where there's just going to be a bunch of finishes. And honestly, that needs to happen because the UFC has been getting some heat about these cards not having a bunch of like stars in there, and obviously there's a lot of stars that aren't fighting, that aren't constantly fighting, and so the UFC needs a card like this ASAP. And for this to be the card back at the Garden, like, this would be insane if the UFC pulls this off and has all of these fights that don't, like, no one pulling out and just stays together. This would be the absolute best card of the year. And so yeah, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this card. Let me know what you guys think about these rumors, because I think, if this card stays together, best card of the year for sure. And so let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.